Europe is gradually reopening the tourists this summer after more than a year of lockdown stemming from the coronavirus pandemic. And to help keep outbreaks at bay, the EU is launching digital COVID certificates. The passes will allow people to travel easily around the 27-nation bloc without having to be quarantined or to be tested. There are, of course, some exceptions. Joining us now to discuss the rollout is Politico reporter Hanne Cokelaere. So, Hanne, good to see you. Let's talk about how these digital certificates will work and who is eligible to receive one.
Well, that's a complicated question. The certificates basically prove whether a traveler got a vaccine, or basically whether they got one vaccine, several vaccines. That will all be on the certificate. But not just that, it will also show whether a traveler got infected with the coronavirus at some point in the recent past, or whether they got a test. So what a certificate really is a tool proving the health status of a traveler to make it easier for EU countries to decide whether such a traveler should be quarantined or tested. So what it doesn't do, this regulation establishing these certificates, it doesn't prescribe that EU countries drop quarantine restrictions or testing requirements. That is being discussed by EU countries in a separate recommendation. They actually agreed to that today, but that's a non-binding recommendation. And the principle there is that people who can prove that they are fully vaccinated or that they recently had the coronavirus and therefore have some kind of immunity, that they don't face any travel restrictions. People who cannot prove that yet, they could still be required to get a pre-departure test if they are traveling from areas that are considered still somewhat risky.
So that's a lot of kind of your personal private information there. Will Americans looking to travel to Europe need to get one of these digital certificates?
Well, the idea is that they're not necessary, also not within the EU. So they've been very keen to stress, the regulators, that it's not a precondition for travel to have these certificates, but it would certainly make things easier if you do. Now, whether the US or travelers from the US needs such a certificate is one step further than reality, which is basically that this is an EU-wide system. So what they would first have to do is agree that a certificate issued by the US would actually be recognized by EU countries. And that work is still ongoing, the Commission said today.
How are... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
sorry. Please continue.
And then a side note, of course, the EU still does restrict non-essential travel from outside of Europe, and they are reviewing this regularly. They recently did decide that vaccinated travelers from outside Europe should be able to travel into Europe. And they're also reviewing whether certain countries should get onto the green list, basically.
How are EU member states expected to comply with these new rules?
How? Well, that's a tricky question. What they have to do by July is they have to recognize certificates that have been issued by other countries according to this regulation, this digital COVID certificate regulation. What they don't necessarily have to do is, as I said before, drop all restrictions when faced with a traveler that can prove that they're fully vaccinated. That's mostly because there is this worry that escape mutations circulate and could undermine the impact of the vaccine rollout in Europe.
So, is the expectation that this would ultimately become mandatory if you want to travel, or is it still kind of like perhaps best practices, but they won't sort of make people comply?
To carry such a certificate is not mandatory, but the expectation is certainly if countries start implementing this, and that is the aim, that this would make your travel much, much easier. According to the rules that EU ambassadors today agreed, and they're supposed to formally adopt this next week. Having such a certificate will make travel in Europe much, much easier, especially if you've been vaccinated, or if you can prove that you have some kind of immunity. So it's not so much that it's mandatory, but if otherwise, you are liable of having to get tested and quarantine until you get the results when traveling across the EU. That's definitely the less interesting options, it seems.
Some people might be concerned about privacy and security. How much personal data will be shared when the certificate is checked?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of concern about this in negotiations. There were concerns that data might be stored too long, that there might be too much access for also different governments to the health data of citizens of other countries. The principle now is that these health data will actually not be stored in a central database, nor will destination countries, so countries people are traveling to, have store these data. So the principle is that there is an EU gateway, basically allowing authorities to authenticate the data on this app. So there's a QR code on this certificate, and they'd use this gateway to just briefly dip into the other countries' databases to authenticate whether the information is actually correct. And regulators have been keen to stress that that actually prevents breaches of data protection.
So there's already been some resistance to just the idea of a COVID passport, a vaccine passport, in Europe and in the U.S. Here in the U.S., some states have already introduced legislation sort of banning vaccine passports preemptively. Why do you think the EU was able to make it happen, and while the U.S. is still sort of scrambling to figure out a plan?
Well, the EU, it's supposed to have a free travel area, and that's actually become a very difficult thing during the pandemic. EU countries have taken very different approaches to travel restrictions, and this notion of coronavirus imports and having to prevent them has made it very difficult to maintain, the free travel area in Europe. So that is a very good argument, and has been a very good argument for EU countries to decide on this. However, they have been very keen to stress that this is actually not a passport, so it's not a travel document. It is first not prerequisite for traveling, although you might face restrictions if you don't have one. But also, it didn't really regulate whether countries will put you in quarantine or will demand that you get tested. So this notion of a passport, they've been very keen to stress it's not the same as what the certificate here is doing. And then to prevent the discrimination, because that's the main argument, right? This worry that the vaccination passport would push people who actually don't really want to get vaccinated at all to get vaccinated after all, because it would be the only way to travel to another country. They've been very keen, again, to prevent that by having the certificate also covering past coronavirus infections, which would suggest that you are in fact immune, or these tests.
Really interesting. Hanne, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.